Hello everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations. You with Simon today. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Great Conjunction. And this will be happening on the Sunday and Monday the 21st or 20th and 21st of December. And this will be involving Jupiter and Saturn, as you can see on the screen. And this will be entering into Aquarius. So some really exciting times for many people, and some really difficult times for a lot of other people. And in between, we'll share kind of both of those experiences. And I'm really excited to be able to unpack this for you today and share my thoughts and what I feel that is part of this conjunction, and how best to use it, or at least merge with it. And maybe to help you kind of objectify certain experiences that you'll see that can be, maybe a little bit disturbing in terms of the way that our social structure is going to change. So before I jump into talking all about this energy, I want to just kind of highlight a few things. So if you're watching this video for the first time, I do encourage you to check out the playlist, to which there are about 6 videos that lead up to this great conjunction, okay? And the intention of that playlist is to give you a kind of map of what was leading up until this point in time. So, some of the things I might reference in this video can pertain to earlier things that I'd said in other videos. And so if you want to kind of start as a series all the way from the first video and leading up to the great conjunction as the big finale, as it were, right? Because we've arrived. You can do that. And so that playlist will be linked in the description and the comments section as well, okay? Last time I talked to you, I said that there was a lecture and workshop that's taking place in January on the Saturn course. And some of you weren't able to register. Just so you know, the registrations are open now again. I spoke to the people that are hosting the lecture, and the registrations are now open. You can go onto their website. I'll put the link in the description and comment section as well. And you can go and read all about what I'm going to be doing on those 2 days, okay? And just so you know, I had somebody that was really struggling to sort of orientate on their registration form. Yes, it is a little bit, not so straightforward. So I just encourage you to, when you're choosing which dates you want to subscribe to, so if you want to just do the lecture, just put in my name and the lecture, and as a guest, of course, because unless you're actually part of the Washington State Astrology Association, like you're a member of them. And also do the same for the lecture if you want to participate, not in the lecture, pardon me, but on the workshop, okay? As you know, Learn Your Chart has been released, and so we're really excited to be sharing with you the up-to-date version of our Learn Your Chart. And at some points, I'm going to be doing a short little video just showing you exactly what you can use with it, and how you can actually go about getting your PDF as well if you would like to invest in that process, where there's an entire PDF with your chart, and you get all. If you click on the planet, then you'll get an audio that's linked with that planet that's specific to you. So just like the previous Learn Your Chart, but this time around it's just audios, so and longer as well. So I'll also put all of that information in the description and comments section, so you can go check out some of the new cool things that we've released on our website, okay? All right, well, let's get into the Great Conjunction video, and let's unpack this for you. And I really hope that you find some value, and that this can bring you something to make sense of in your life. I do encourage you to go get your astrology chart and observe where this conjunction will be landing in your chart, because the house and sign will play a significant role in terms of what will take place for you for the next 20 years. So what do you do with that information? Well, I would simply say that wherever it's landing in your chart, know that that area of your life is going to change for the next 20 years. Obviously, our entire lives do change, but that's something that will have a very distinct Jupiter-Saturn-esque essence to it, as opposed to just things changing, okay? So check out where that lands in your chart, and I'm sure every one of you, including myself, like, oh, what does that mean, right? I don't know if that's possible to answer that question. And the reason why I say that is because A, these planetary archetypes they manifest themselves in cycles. B, the mind wants to know in a finite way what's going to happen. And C, we live in a quantum experience. And so therefore, when the cycle matures over a period of 3 years and 5 years and 10 years, we get to be able to understand what it is. So the best thing that you can do to be able to understand what this great conjunction would represent to you is just that there's a new beginning, the seeds for an entirely new evolutionary cycle regarding the way that you define your reality, Saturn, and the way that you subscribe to the philosophical truth that you would like to use as your core state of integrity, right? That relationship between the two is going to bloom into something completely new, okay? We don't know what that is. Nobody knows. It's not possible because we're not like 16 or 10 or 5 years down the road and we're looking back and saying, oh, that makes sense. So please, when you're trying to figure out or ask yourself the question, what does it mean? The simplest thing that you can say is that something is going to change regarding my philosophical structure and the way that I define my sense of direction in life, and what house that's going to land up in will speak to an area of your life that will have that. And then go live our lives, because it will just, cascade into something that eventually will become our reality after 2 or 3 years, etc. Right? But the seed of this new thing is just it's like it's there. It's like it's just been planted. So we don't know what it is, right? Okay. All right. So I've got my little notes in front of me over here. And the first thing that I want to start by doing is just defining Saturn and Jupiter and Aquarius, these 3 archetypes, okay? So we'll start off with Jupiter. And the simplest way to understand Jupiter in your chart is that each and every single one of us has a relationship to an organizing structure of perceptions, okay? Each and every one of us has a relationship, so me and something else, and that relationship is an organizing structure of perceptions. So we perceive things this way, we perceive things that way. And so the organizing structure is, the best way that I like to see the metaphor is that it is an umbrella. It's an umbrella that's over us like this, okay? And that organizing structure has perceptions in it, and it's all of the information that you've gathered in your life, right? All of this information that you've gone on the internet and you've discovered some information, right? We need this organizing structure. And that relationship to that organizing structure gives us a sense of orientation. In other words, we orientate in the phenomena of reality relative to this organizing structure, okay? So very simply, your belief system, okay? Your organizing principles that you say, okay, well, when I look at reality, I see it through that lens. So astrology would fall under the system of thought that would allow you to see reality a certain way, okay? Now, each and every single one of us has an organizing philosophical structure that allows us to digest, make sense of reality, right? We filter reality through our cosmological sense of perception of truth, all right? And so along the road, we will come into contact with information and we'll put that information in our field of awareness. And then when, say, a scenario or a situation comes our way, we will use that information to try and unlock the sequence of challenges that a set experience gives us, okay? So this philosophical overlay can either give us the meaning of life because we're orientated towards pursuing or understanding what that meaning is, or it can simply just give us, I don't know, a sense of how to make food, right? Or let's say you want to cook some food and there is a certain philosophy or a certain way of making food. And so you, just as an example, like different cultures will do and have a relationship to food in different ways, and right? And so we see things from different perspectives. So Jupiter is this overarching structure that allows us to see things, a perception-orientated system. Okay, we each have different, we have different ones. And so when it lands in the sign of Aquarius, what you can see here is that every single person over this arc, okay, will come into contact with how they see things in a very unique way, okay? And so put a pin in that, and we'll come back to that when we've talked about Aquarius. Now Saturn, and again, I'm seeing Saturn in this context. Saturn, you can feel it viscerally, right? If you're holding a phone in your hand right now and you feel it like that concrete, not that concrete, but that object in your hand, it feels very solid. That's Saturn, right? It's the physical things in the world that you can grab on, and so the density of the vibration with Saturn is the material world. Okay, so on one level, Saturn correlates to gravity, or the density of something in our world. Okay, and so when we look at Saturn from a physical sense, we're looking at the physical reality, and we're looking at time. All right, and that leads me then to understanding the relationship between time. Right, if you think about it, this video will take a certain amount of your time. Okay, and you'll notice that you can measure that time, because on the video it will say this is 40 minutes long or this is 30 minutes long. And so there's a start point and an end point, and in between is a space that you explore that feels abstract and indivisible, right? But at the end of the video, you will be able to say, oh, I spent 30 minutes or 40 minutes listening to this person blab on about this random conjunction that's taking place in the sky. Okay, all right, so that space between the two, that measurement, time, all right, and your emotional connection to it then has to do with the moon, right? So there's that space there, and we define it. So we define something, and we use measurement, and we use time. And so when we look at Saturn, what we see is the maturation process of something, the maturation process of your life, which is why we'll use Chronos to measure our physical and biological existence, our biological chronos, in other words, our biological time. So at the age of 7, we see a change in our body structure. We become slightly aware of our mortality. At the age of 14, our hormones and our lymphatic system and endocrine system come online in a stronger way. And so therefore we see a change in our biological structure. And so we measure our life according to Saturn's principles of time and so on. Okay, so this is the maturation process of your life. You see somebody that is just born and you compare it to somebody that is just about to die, and you'll see that their skin texture is different, and you'll see the elasticity within the skin texture changes, right? It softens. Saturn. Okay, all right, so within the context of that, the principle is boundaries. All right, so we have truth and we have boundaries, right? Saturn being boundaries, truth being Jupiter. And so when these two come together and they merge, what they create is an entirely new evolutionary cycle related to the way that we will come into contact and we will define truth and definition. How we will define our truth, how we will define our society and our culture, how we will define the boundaries that are okay to exist within or not, right? So because Saturn and Jupiter exist between Uranus and Mars, what we have is social planets that are interpersonal as well. So we have our individual truth, Saturn, Jupiter, and we define that. And then we have the cultural truth and definitions and laws. And the interplay between the two, all right, is where we take our truth and we say, oh, we don't like the way that these people do this, right? Our truth is in conflict with the cultural truth, the collective, the shared cosmology. Okay, and then the laws will be different to our definitions. So the country's authority and your authority, right? Your truth and the cultural truth. So these two interface with each other. Okay, so social planets and then individual planets and how those two interface, right? So Aquarius, very, very briefly, would say there is no pattern, consistency. Okay, inconsistency. There's no pattern. Saturn says consistency, follow the grain, wake up on Monday, go to work, wake up on Tuesday, go to work. I feel safe in that. I feel secure in that. That's a boundary. Uranus says do away with everything. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. Oh, look, it happens. And then you're like, oh, cool, let's follow the pattern. And then we follow the pattern and we're like, oh, that pattern doesn't exist. It's too irrational. It doesn't make sense. It's chaotic. So Uranus is that energy that exists, and we can, in a mental way, we can understand as a quantum field. All right. So within the Uranian realm or the Aquarius realm, it opens us up from the subjective sense of self to the transpersonal self. In other words, that we have this physical body and we operate in a very linear way, but within the context of how fractals work, within the context of how energy manifests itself and how things outside of our linear perception of reality, we will have non-divisible time. In other words, there is no time outside of time. And so within the context of does the soul live past lives? No, it doesn't. All things are instantly manifest, okay? So it kind of leads us into Neptune and Pluto, right? Transpersonal planets. So Uranus is the gateway. It's the threshold. It's the point of breaking the pattern and reorganizing it into something completely new and random, right? And it's the future, and it is the past, and everything simultaneously, okay? So when we think about Uranus, or you think about Aquarius within its behavior, mechanically, it actually embodies an aspect of Saturn. And the reason why is because these two planets, just like with Jupiter and Saturn, they interplay with each other. Well, Uranus and Saturn interplay with each other. Saturn says, hold the line. Uranus says, break it, right? And so these two are always constantly in conversation with each other saying, do we hold the line? No, we don't. We need to change the pattern. So we transform. Uranus comes along and says, we need to change chaos, we need to create chaos. And Saturn says, no, too much chaos creates way too much uncertainty. It's not healthy right now. We hold the line, right? And there's that interplay between the two. So when you think about Uranus and Saturn, similarly with Saturn and Jupiter, the only difference is that Uranus is on the outskirts of everything that is known. And so it leads us into the unknown. It's the threshold, and we're crossing a threshold. So Jupiter, Saturn, and Aquarius is the seeds for a new evolutionary cycle to occur in which our truth and our boundaries are coming into a point in which we're going to cross a threshold into a completely new, uncharted territory for us all. All right? And so what that feels like psychologically and emotionally is I was born for this time, and I am a... not Chronos, but what was the other word? It was the embodiment of moment-to-moment reality. I can't remember it now, but I will at some point. So it's Uranus and Saturn. So Saturn is Chronos, and Uranus, I can't remember it. It's going to irritate me a little bit. But anyway, it's the moment-to-moment reality. So we're entering a phase in which our reality is more in the moment and in the now, and we're moving along relative to our sense, resonance. So it's no longer about consistency, but it's more about how do we meet in that moment and share that moment and then embody that moment, all right, and then move on, right? So we are being led more with something that is leading us into the unconscious or leading us into the unknown. And so that uncertainty with the mind creates a lot of panic. You're going to see a lot of panic with these two planets as they move through Aquarius, because everybody has systematically defined their life through this organizing principle of logic. And Uranus does not have logic. It has, I know. I just know. And it's in that moment of just complete certainty. It's a moment of insight that transcends time. And it opens us up to a quantum field of knowing. And so this relationship between these two planets is going to reveal to us over the next 20 years a complete integration of non-linear reality into our world. And you can already start to see that in some way, shape, or form, because for most people, technology has now become a necessity in terms of your life. You go and buy a webcam on the internet right now, or at least in when Saturn first went into Aquarius, and it was almost nearly impossible because every person went, oh, I didn't know I needed a webcam because all of a sudden now I'm on Zoom doing some work, and so therefore I need a webcam, right? It was just completely, it was nuts. It was like sold out. And there are some places that still do not have, they're not selling, even though there are people that create webcams, they're like, sorry, sold out, right? And there are sort of other people that have decided to jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, okay, well, there's a need, so therefore let's facilitate that. That's a funny thing that I observed. It generally tends to occur when there's sudden changes within cultural patterns that people pick up on it and they say, this seems to be something we need to invest in, right? Okay, so does everybody get the sense here that our entire cosmology independently, and the way that we define that cosmology independently through Aquarius, we'll lead ourselves through a threshold, and then as we come onto the other side, we will start to notice we're interfacing with an entirely new way of life, a completely new way of life. For ourselves, individually, we're coming into individuating our truth. And what that looks like is deliverance from the shared fantasy of collective truth and the reclaiming of one's own individual sense of self. Not the, oh, well, if that person does that, that seems to be right for them, so it must be right for me, right? No, it might not be right for you because your way of, so there is a specific distancing and deconditioning from the attachment to collective shared ideological truths and to want to find and to discover and explore and individuate your own truth. And so in that sense, I can say that's what will be the thing that will mature for you over the next 20 years. And wherever this lands in your chart, know karmically, you were born at a time in which that planetary system that is happening now will sync with exactly where you need to be within your emotional journey of the soul, not where you need to be physically, but emotionally where you are. And so if it's in your fourth house, just know for the next 20 years, you're going to be working deeply on individuating your emotional sense of self away from certain emotional patterns that are rooted to the home. Saturn, Jupiter in your first house, right? Individuating yourself from certain ways in which you've defined and identified yourself in the moment, and how you will be working on creating an entirely new sense of self, right? Saturn in the 7th, Jupiter in the 7th. How you develop boundaries, how you develop your sense of identity in relation to people, right? Like progressively stepping away from the shared collective I to the individual I, interacting with all other individual I's, right? And so in that sense, we're part of the whole, but we're individual in terms of that whole. And so we have different skill sets that when we collaborate, create a shared experience. Does that make sense? Right? So you're good at that. You're good at that. How do we collaborate? Right? Aquarius themes. Okay. So Saturn and Aquarius, Jupiter and Aquarius, individuation of truth, right? To come into one's own sense of self. And the way I see this, and I call it this because I really feel this way, and I'll unpack it for you. But to me, it's about the realization the threshold will become something along the lines of life or death, right? Dead or alive, right? This energy will either awaken you to the spirit, the meaning of your existence in a transpersonal way, or you will become, in a sense, very aware of the emptiness that exists in the outside world, and your relationship to the objects have become dead. In other words, you are dead inside because the spirit of yourself is not arise. What brings you joy? What brings you into your space? And sometimes we don't even know how to answer that question. And that's a really good key to say, okay, let's go and do that. Let's go and heal. Where we are disassociated, where we have become detached, where we have become disconnected, right, from ourselves. And so therefore we form relationships to objects as the thing that gives us a sense of impulse to be alive, but yet inside we are missing the truth of ourselves. Okay, so dead or alive to me is something that comes along with this planetary system as well. Okay, so I've got my little chart over here, and hopefully it switches. Fantastic. Okay, cool. So everybody can see my little marker. Great. So as you can see, there, Jupiter and Saturn, my little cursor is right above the Aquarius archetype. It's 11 o'clock position on the chart. Okay, there it is there. right? Aquarius, the moon will have passed over Neptune at that time. So it tells me something along the lines of, is the spirit in you or is the spirit externalized? In other words, are you part of the shared fantasy of the collective ideas, or are you slowly reclaiming your individual perception of truth and living that out? What is your universal cosmology? Not what is the shared cosmology, but what is your individual cosmology, right? So we move away from religious ideologies as one utopian God, and you come into contact with your own inner Godhead, right? And then you navigate according to that, right? In the simplest terms, you can now finish the video. It's done. I've given you the information you need to know. Right? But that's it. That's it. Coming into your own truth and living that way, and not participating in shared ideals, but coming into what is your individual truth. Okay, and living according to what that means for you, right? Okay, so there's two things I want to talk about, right? What's interesting to me is, so Jupiter, I'm just looking at my notes over here. Let's talk about the nodes, okay? So as you know, Uranus sits here in Taurus at the moment. The planetary nodes of Neptune sit here between 4 and 11 degrees of Aquarius. There you can see the line. I can actually draw the line if it allows me to. Let's see. Come on. There we go. Pen. Right. Planetary nodes of Neptune sit here. And as you can see very clearly, as we have the great conjunction, Neptune squares the nodes. There's 19 degrees of Sagittarius, 19 degrees of Gemini, and Neptune is sitting at 18. So the moon crosses when we have the great conjunction aspect. And so that's really fascinating to me, because the fact that the moon crosses at the time, like Jupiter is actually 3 minutes behind it. So this is not the exact conjunction moment, but that's interesting to me because this is in closer phase. While they are at 0 degrees, it's still balsamic by 3 minutes. Right? It still holds the seeds of the new energy, but you can see the moon crosses it just before Jupiter and Saturn actually form that exact conjunction. So as that happens, you see closure and culmination from the past, and you see the seeds for a new evolutionary direction begin to phase in. And what does that pertain to? What does that look like? Well, to me, that has to do with the planetary nodes of Uranus and Neptune. So planetary nodes of Uranus sit here, and so Neptune squares it, and then you have Uranus squaring the planetary nodes of Neptune sitting here as well, as you can see. So there it sits in Taurus, it squares the planetary nodes of Neptune there, and Neptune squares the planetary nodes of Uranus. Okay, so there's an interplay there. All right. So what does that mean, Simon? Well, as I've talked about before, when you look at planetary nodes, what you've got to see as the collective groove that we're all swimming in an archetypal theme, and we all have our individual colors on, but there is a stream of consciousness that is moving through an archetypal bed, a riverbed. Think of archetypes as awareness. So the awareness moves is like a river. It's the water in the river, and the archetype is the bed, as it were, the riverbed, the river banks that houses it. Okay, and so the archetypes, and then consciousness kind of flows there like water. So we are moving through the planetary nodes of Uranus, Neptune, and so planetary nodes of Uranus very, very distinctly is individual truth, right? South Node and Sag. How do we all make the sense of meaning of life? And how do we communicate that and accept diversity? North Node in Gemini. And then the planetary nodes of Neptune and sit in Leo, Aquarius, and they correlate to the way that we find meaning in spirituality, and that is coursed through individuality. Very, 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 very briefly, individuality, and so planetary nodes of Uranus, individual truth. Okay, so we're closing Neptune with the moon crossing over Neptune. We are closing an entire evolutionary cycle related to the way that we as a society have found the meaning and how we have constructed our truth in accordance to that meaning. Everything that we have self-actualized in the past will fade away. Everything that we have found meaning and truth in fades away. And this energy cycle brings in and ushers in a new seed of awareness that comes in. And one of the ways you can actually see that literally happening in reality is, if you haven't seen it yet, but go and read about the great global reset, the financial reset, and all that nonsense. Okay, it's succinct with this, an entirely new structural way of how society is going to operate. And of course, it's not a coincidence that it's all occurring while we have these two planetary energies of Jupiter and Saturn that are social energies moving and reshaping the landscape of our society. And think about it. I highly encourage you to go and look at a map that you can actually see I can't remember the exact terminology, but if you can see what the ground looks like on Earth, and I'm not talking about just ground, I'm talking about like the stress lines when tectonic plates move, and thinking about how the geographic location of our world has occurred, through great tectonic movements and seismic waves, isostatic balance, all of that type of stuff. Think about it in terms of how that's occurring on a social level for us. And so people are feeling stranded in some places. People are finding that they are losing their homes because we are shifting, right, within the social sphere. We are shifting collectively in our cosmological thinking, our ways of being. The entire stratosphere of our existence is being relocated, and it's been occurring. And the echoes of Uranus and Pluto's square from 2012 to 2018 are existing here. We are in the vibration of that echo, of that experience. And that has been a complete radical shift in society. Okay, we now see using, like, I'll give you an example, and I want to touch on that a little bit later. It's my next process. So let me just culminate here, right? Neptune sitting at 18 degrees of Pisces, squares the planetary nodes of Uranus, indicates complete healing related to the past traumas that we've been experiencing by participating in a shared ideological fantasy of one God, aka religion, dealing with all that shame, purifying all of that nonsense, and coming into individual truth. And collective truths and collective ideas no longer have value anymore. And so as that fades, we lose a sense of identity that becomes associated with that life, right? That's why we'll feel that sense of, I feel empty, right? Yes, because your entire psychological and emotional attachment to reality that was embedded in that world is also going, right? Okay, so that's fading away collectively, and we're all having that shared experience. Okay. All right, so planetary nodes play a massive role in this, and you can see how that's showing up. Okay, so planetary nodes, so Uranus sits in Taurus, and what I find interesting about this is that the currency of our time is also changing. And you've got to think about it this way, right? Riverbank currency, currency flows like electricity. And so what we have here is the currency of our times is also changing. At some point, our society and our world saw that factories, for instance, in the industrial age had currency. And so if you were an entrepreneur and you wanted to kind of make some money, you would set up a factory and you would get workers and people would clock in and you'd manufacture something, and that would be the currency, right? You could sell shoes and that would be the way. We have moved on from that. And so the new currency in the world is becoming something more physical, although not, like things like cryptocurrency as an example, literally, right? It's digital. Your currency in terms of your self-worth has now become something also digital, right? Let's say you want to create a YouTube channel and you want to share yourself. If you have terrible recording equipment, the currency to which you're going to succeed is probably not going to be great, because people will say, well, I don't really enjoy watching this video. That's not to say that that's the truth, by the way. I'm just saying that the way that we measure things in terms of value is shifting. And it has dramatically shifted. And what you will now see with Jupiter and Saturn entering Aquarius is the assimilation of what was the fringe currency in 2013 and 2014. So all the people that went, this is the way that new things occur, and we're like on the outskirts of it, and society says, you don't have a physical job. What's wrong with you? You're lazy. Why would you want to go and invest your time in things like, I don't know, creating videos on YouTube as an example, or, you know, for some of the younger kids that are now on technology. If you think about that guy, the Twitch streamer, I can't remember his name exactly, but he played Fortnite. And I mean, that dude has, I mean, the amount of money that person has, I can't remember his name exactly, Ninja. Yeah, there we go, Ninja. I mean, he literally just played a video game, and he has more money in his bank account than probably all of us sitting on this YouTube channel that would amount in our lives, you know, in the past world that we'd lived. Like, we've worked 60 years and we would never have accumulated the amount of currency that person has just playing video games. That's switched. The currency of our time has changed. If you want to sit and, I mean, I saw literally, there's on the internet right now, and I think this is an interesting way of how we live, but I see people that say, come study with me, right? And I'm sure maybe one or two of you have even done that, where they'll just set up a camera here, and they'll study, and you watch them study, and you can also study yourself, right? So you're literally not studying with the person physically, but you're studying with them in a transpersonal way. Do you see the Aquarius element to this process, right? Okay, so now all of a sudden the boundaries are gone, right? And we're assimilating. And so just like with this other video, the same people, they literally had the camera there, and they were just, literally, you're just watching them interact with life. They were just interacting as if you were watching the Truman Show. You're just watching these people interact. They're not interacting with you, but they're just like, hey, come hang with us. They got some music in the background, and they're just doing their own thing, and you're watching it. That's Aquarius. The currency to which you exist right now has radically changed. And that's what Uranus and Saturn square will do through the next year, is that you will watch the tectonic plates of Saturn and Uranus's square bring into the physical world, right, the way that this new fringe reality in 2013 and 2014 becomes the norm. It will literally become the norm. Oh, yeah, you have a Zoom account. Yes, you have a Zoom account. But in 2013, when I discovered, or 2014, when I discovered Zoom, I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. It gives me all of these features, right? Now, today, we all use it because it's necessity. And you'll see that. You'll see that things that appeared to be, you know, just the cool, like the technology nerds that use things, they'll be like, oh, that's normal, that's natural. So for those of you that learned code, that learned how to code, that learned how to invest in being able to understand and build websites, you're literally sitting on an entire marketplace in which you can say, oh, that person wants to self-actualize, that's fine. I'll outsource 20 hours of work and I'll build you a website. That's the world we're entering, and it becomes the norm. And that's what this energy is about. It's the social interface between people wanting to self-actualize and find their own dream and let the people know on the world, and the people that will come along and say, I'll know how to build that infrastructure. That's one of them. The other one is where there's a complete detachment from technological process and going into and living further away from the constant use of technology. And I kind of like that one too, right? Because there's a sense where you can detach from yourself so much that you actually lose the physical sensations of yourself. Have you noticed that when you're doing a YouTube video or you're doing a Zoom call, there's an aspect of yourself that another person cannot interact with? Like maybe they can't smell that you haven't used deodorant, as an example. Or you know, in some cases, right, some people will be in a meeting, for instance, and they'll have a good shirt at the top, but you know, if your socks are a different color, nobody's going to go, oh, you know, why have you dressed a bit funny today? They won't see that. That's another thing here. There's a dimension of reality that is missing, that we can't sense, feel, Saturn, right, with our reality. And that's, I think, something that will disturb a lot of us as well. And so that's part of this process that will take place. Okay, so Uranus, Saturn, mental health, I want to talk about that. And just in terms of like things like Facebook, social media, these things and this ties in with 1993, 1994, when Uranus and Neptune made their conjunctions in Capricorn. So let me just do this over here. In 1993, 1994, 1992, etc., Uranus and Neptune were in Capricorn, they made a conjunction. And now what we had then from that point onwards was we had Neptune and Uranus move through Aquarius. So we had these outer planets move through Aquarius, and that set in stone in the collective our awareness related to the way that we got YouTube, the way that we got video sharing sites, the way that we transitioned from CDs to MP3s completely, and then eventually just to audio streaming and Spotify, etc. These types of things. You can see things like Facebook as an example. I mean, it's an Aquarius energy, right? Very detached. There's a dimension to the friends that you have there that don't know you personally and yet feel as if they're living with you. So there's that entire process that happened when when Uranus and Neptune transited through Aquarius. And so what we're seeing now is that these social planets are moving through those signs, or will be moving through those signs. And now it becomes, instead of just this outer energy of peripheral manifestation being there, you're starting a YouTube channel and you're going to make money with that, right? In 2013, well, that's a hobby. In 2020, most people are like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do as my main source of income, as an example, right? And at some point, that won't even become the context of our lives. We won't even say that I need that income. It's the nature of currency is going to diversify and decentralize to the point where each and every single experience that you have has its own currency, its own world. Like, I'll give an example, right? My daughters play this game called Adopt Me, and when they're playing Adopt Me, they're trading their pets, okay? And part of trading their pets is being able to understand the currency and the value of a digital commodity. When I played World of Warcraft, for instance, was the same thing. There was digital currency that was had. And so everything you see now will have digital currency. And worlds will start to manifest of manifestations and fantasies of people that will conjure up something. Like, for instance, Adopt Me is the fantasy world that was created by the creators. And in their world, there's certain rules and regulations and ideals and perspectives. And in there is a currency. And you'll start to see that we'll shift away from a collective currency, as in we all share one thing, to individual currency. And your sense of individuated truth and your world will define that currency. And you'll see it diversify completely. And that has to do with that great conjunction that took place with Uranus and Neptune. That was the original thing that created this world, the outer structure. It seeded in to our awareness that time was no longer going to be linear in that way, and we would interact with it. And then they moved through Aquarius, and we built the infrastructure. And now the social planets are coming in and saying, now it is part of an everyday life that you need to interact with this digital world. And that's what will happen with the next 20 years, right? Okay. Mental health. Probably the biggest thing that I think, I mean, for me personally, I advocate it a lot, but mental health will become something very, very clear to all of us as this energy goes through. Aquarius correlates to trauma. It correlates to mental health. It correlates to detachment that leads to disassociation relative to traumatic experiences. And you will start to see that the rise of mental health will become very clear to you. A lot of people will lose touch with themselves. And that's a whole entire conversation around the pandemic that is narcissism. And you'll start to see that with the planetary nodes of Uranus, planetary nodes of Neptune, being in Aquarius and Leo, right? Everybody will self-actualize and become self-important. And so then we will essentially create alternate personalities. And that's something that's also part of this process, right? With that Neptune square the nodes, it will have alternate personalities, right? You go online and you create an alter ego or alter personality and you interface with that, and we'll develop more and more relationships to that sense of self until we get to a point where we actually think that that's who we are. Whereas it's just a projection of our own, a part of us that, we identify with, but we don't see it as us. In that sense, right? We detach it a little bit. We'll come closer to that, and eventually it becomes an assimilation of us. We might even stop identifying with ourselves with our given names from our parent, because that's all old school, and we'll identify more with characteristic traits or labels that we give ourselves that are not our original name. I'm curious to see what happens with that, to be honest. Okay, so detachment and the relationship to mental health. So I encourage you, if you know somebody that is struggling, if you are struggling yourself, to take it seriously and to get yourself help. 100%. Please, please, please do not mess with this energy. This energy will show you yourself. And if you haven't dealt with your demons, if you haven't dealt with the parts of you that have been traumatized, that you've disassociated from, that you have coping mechanisms from, this is the energy that will bring it to the surface. Okay? So please pay attention to that. The Promethean energy is arriving here. And so what comes with technology also comes detachment and disassociation. All right. Okay. So my final thoughts for this video in terms of this energy is that you will see a split. Okay, in the next 20 years, there's going to be a distinct split between people that will assimilate into a synthetic world and have not internalized their authority, and so they will release their freedom for a collective shared security. Okay, in other words, society will become two ways. It will become a way where people will be perceived as outdated, and that you will be perceived as part of the past and you're stuck in there, and people who will lean into technology advancements, and so you'll see the split that will literally occur. That's also the Neptune moon square the nodes over there on Uranus to square the nodes. You will literally see a split in humanity, and they will be very distinctly different to each other. One will be pro-vaccine, other people will not be pro-vaccine. Other people will be pro 5G technology, people will not be pro-technology. It will literally be that black and white, and you will watch it occur within this life. So over the next 20 years, you'll see a distinct split that will take place. And that's just the nature of how it is. It's nothing wrong. It's just how we will form a relationship to the integration of the technological world and how we see it essentially, and how we manage it individually. So yeah, individual truth, individual perspective, coming into your own sense of ideology, breaking away from shared ideologies and shared truths, coming into your own self-actualization from the point of view of your soul, finding the meaning in your life, coming into the essence of who you are at the deepest core way, and realizing that we're growing out of our reality. Like, we're growing out of the comfort zones of what we have known, and we are now in deep space, and we're exploring and we're aligning with things that resonate with us and do not. And in the Aquarius energy, it's not about you're wrong and I'm right. It's we're different, and that's your trajectory. This is my trajectory, and thanks very much for the time. We move on. Okay. All right, people. Thank you very much for sharing with me this time, Saturn, and my perspective and thoughts on this process. Of course, there's still more to share on it in the sense of deepening the things that I labeled, but I will be doing that as we go along into 2021. I really hope that you found some value in this process. Let me know of your thoughts and your comments in the comment section. Don't forget the astrological workshop and lecture that's been happening next year in January. Sign up for that. Check out Learn Your Chart. And yeah, have an amazing day. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.